Good afternoon, guys. Welcome to the February 24th, 2023 edition of News from the Front Lines of Business. I'm David Huff, CPA with DW Huff Consulting, where we help you know your numbers so that you can grow your numbers. So made it through another week. Looks like we are past the Mardi Gras lull in the action, kind of really full speed with taxes here. Plenty of conversations and plenty of things that could be helpful to you. So one of the conversations we have pretty regular regards tax planning for college expenses. And while there aren't a great number of ways to get a tax deduction for contributions, the four most commonly used vehicles here are kind of listed below. So once again, we're very busy, so forgive me for the lack of great slides. So I did whip something together here and kind of go over the four general categories and why you'd use one over the other. So the first is the 529 plan, and Louisiana has their own version of that, which is called the Start Savings Program. We like it a lot, and while you don't get a tax deduction per se going into it, you do get a break on your state taxes, as well as the potential for a matching contribution from the state of Louisiana. So once the money's in there, you get the same tax, free growth of it. As long as you're using it on the back end for a qualified expense, you don't have to worry about any kind of gains on, tax on the gains that you made. But yeah, that state matching is one thing that's kind of unique. So if you're a state, Louisiana resident, that's a benefit that would tilt me more in a direction of this versus some other 529 plans you might see with a different, mutual fund provider or something like that. So consider that a good option. And of course, if you have a case where on the far right of my chart here, if you decide you're going to use it for non-education expenses, you're going to pay some tax on the gains, possibly penalty, if you don't transfer it to another qualified beneficiary. So that option exists. The Coverdell, which is commonly referred to as the education IRA, so that's a little different deal, but that's limited to $2,000 a year of a contribution, but not tax deductible at all. Grows tax free if you use it for qualified expenses. But I want to highlight one thing we like about this particular savings vehicle is that it's not just allowable for college expenses. It can also, kindergarten through 12. So, we got those Catholic school tuitions coming up and other expenses that you could foresee having to probably tap into your money before the age of 18. This gives you another way of that's better than some of the other options out there. So a little more flexibility, but you don't get to contribute as much to it. But also, if you get to the end of the road here and you do need to take it out, there will be some penalty on the gains and some tax on the gains. If you don't transfer it to another recipient, so you are allowed to roll it over to somebody else in the family. So that's a plus on that one. But another couple, that are not as, conventionally thought of as education savings is the I-bond. So we talk about this frequently here and how it's just a great way to save money as compared to a bank account. So just to recap what the I-bond is, you buy it from treasurydirect.gov. It's a federal issued bond, but it gives you an interest rate that's it's already some low fraction of a percent normally. But in addition to that regular interest rate, they tack on an inflation rate that is good for its resets every 6 months. So then that's why we like this money. You save it, you're never going to go backwards compared to inflation. So that's a big difference from when you're comparing it to even a CD. I mean, a lot of CDs right now are you're lucky if you get 5% going out to really long maturity terms. So, but generally the CDs are better than a passbook savings account, but still nowhere near what an I-bond will produce for you. So, a couple of drawbacks. You can't touch the I-bond for a year, and there's some you forfeit some interest if you take it out before 5 years. But the fact that you're keeping ahead of inflation makes this a really smart choice. And then I guess some of the tax problems here. So with no tax deduction when it goes in. However, the tax on the interest that's earned, you don't pay any kind of tax on those earnings while it's in the I-bond that you don't redeem. So federal and state tax, no go until you take the money out. And if you take it out for college, it's excludable from income. So we like that. And of course, if you don't go to college, it's just a regular I bond. So it's you could let that be your regular emergency savings fund if your child turns out to not need it for college expenses. So because of the flexibility, we really like that, and the fact that if you're putting it into a child's account when they're young, that 1 year blackout period where you can't do anything, it kind of becomes a non-issue, as does the case with the 5 year forfeiture of earnings if you that's considered to be an early withdrawal of it, or an early redemption. So all I think kind of is out the window when you're talking about putting it in a young child's account. But another similar, non-conventional planning opportunities is the Roth IRA. So if the child has earned incomes, that's I guess the caveat there. They got to have earned income in order to contribute to it, but no tax deduction going in, tax-free earnings, and if you take it out for college expenses, the penalty, it's a 10% penalty that normally happens when you take out of any kind of IRA, before you're 59 and a half years old, that goes away. You just got to pay some tax on the earnings. So you put some basis in there, it's going to make some capital gains and dividends along the way, and that will be taxed at ordinary rate. But still, it's a favorite way of pulling things up because we like that flexibility. But the fact that, number one, the basis, so that those original contributions always come out tax-free. So if you kind of play with that a little bit and don't take out such an amount that you're tapping into earnings, you still might not pay any tax on it. And then, of course, if you don't need it for college, it's your retirement account. So you let it ride until you're 59 and a half, and use it for retirement savings if you don't need it. So anyway, so we like so more things to think about when you're contributing. So there's a lot of different ways to do this, and I see people getting kind of carried away sometimes with the 529 plans, and sometimes it has some unfavorable consequences if it's not used for school because of all sorts of reasons, scholarships, military, just doing something else, so we like to be, building some flexibility to how we save, as most everybody doesn't have unlimited amount of money. So, all right, so that's it for the college savings chat we've had with some clients this week. But another thing that comes up, so we're dealing with our business tax returns now, and also looking at some people have made less or more than they thought, and we always preach and know your numbers, and I really can't emphasize that enough, that the certain numbers as a business owner or an investor that you just got to watch every day. So it may not be some kind of really complicated financial statement with GAAP financial statements and all that kind of stuff. It could be some basic stuff. So on your business, if you're in a sales related type entity, for an example, you might know that a certain number of calls every day is going to generate a certain number of meetings, and a certain number of meetings generate a certain number of sales. So it could be 10 calls to get one meeting, and every one meeting might get you half of a sale or one sale, whatever. But so knowing some basic numbers and watching them every day is helpful. So on the business side too, I think you it's deposited to the bank, so you might not always have the the time available to do a real complicated accounting down to the item level, but it's hitting the bank, right? You know what some of your basic expenses are. So I think if you just watch those things on a daily basis, you can deal with the rest of the stuff at some monthly closeout process or something along those lines, and be pretty good. But then that kind of tells you where you are. So if if your bank deposits are $1,000 and your fixed cost of $5,000. Obviously, you got to get cracking so you don't have to worry about tapping into credit lines or other ways to deal with that shortfall. So, watching that stuff every single day, I found is important. And as we see for our successful businesses who are making money and making more and hitting targets, and last year they have certain things they watch, and based on how those numbers shake out, that drives what they're doing the following day to make numbers work. So that's something it's investments, anything that involves making money. There's always some activity that drives that increase in earnings. So figure out what it is, figure out a way to get it done every day, and stick with it. We had some other updates on. This is more of a technical issue, but the corporate Transparency Act. So the reason why this is important is that when you're setting up, say, a new LLC, some states, I always have to do something with the Secretary of State that says, lets them know who's the owner, who the beneficial parties are, and that sort of thing. But there's some changes to that now. So it used to be you could really just do these filings with one owner, and then that owner could be maybe an entity that is in Wyoming or Nevada, one of those states that don't have a high level of disclosure. And by setting things up in that certain way, you were able to kind of shield from public view who owns some of these companies. So that's useful if you have a industry and a business that could possibly have a high exposure to lawsuits. So it makes it a little bit harder for the opposing attorney who is suing you to figure out who owns it and figure out if it's worth pursuing. But there are some changes that will be coming up at the end of this year that make a little bit more. There's a more increased requirement now to show who the beneficial owners are, and it's anybody with a more than 25% interest. So now, anybody that's a kind of a major owner now is going to be disclosed publicly, which could make it a little easier to be sued when something goes wrong, or just another thing to watch. You may want to consider increases to insurance levels and that sort of thing if you have set yourself up in such a way where you think you're getting some anonymity. So anyway, that's coming up. So with that, I got a ton of stuff to do. But as I was reflecting on yesterday night, I was working late, kind of not thrilled with that at 10:30 at night, finishing up some stuff that needed to be done. I was thinking about how I didn't like working so late. But anyway, then this popped up on my news feed and Facebook when I wake up this morning. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. So it's one of my Stoic quotes. So so no matter how tired or wishing I was doing something else besides working there's worse things that could be going on in your life, and things are good. So we can get back to work, and we'll see y'all next week. Bye bye.